I still remember the first time I laid eyes on the letter. It felt like a punch to the gut. A $1,200 fine for something as ridiculous as mud. Yeah, you heard that right. Mud. And it wasn't just any mud. It was the kind of mud that showed up after the storm of the century, the one that turned half the county into a swamp. I could feel my blood start to boil. The words blurred before my eyes. $1,200 for mud. The letter came from Karen Bishop, the president of the Oak Ridge Meadows Homeowners Association. She signed it with all the confidence of someone who thought she ruled the world. And in her eyes, she did. She wielded her clipboard like a scepter, deciding what was right and wrong in our neighborhood with a cold, dismissive smile. That fine wasn't about mud. It was about control. It was about reminding me and everyone else that she held the power. And boy, was she about to learn a hard lesson. My name's Mark Henderson. For 25 years, I worked as a hydrologist in the Army Corps of Engineers. If there's one thing I know, it's water. I know how it moves, where it goes, and how quickly it can cause destruction if you don't respect it. So when I looked at that fine, I knew one thing for sure. The mud on my driveway wasn't just a fluke. Something had changed, and it wasn't Mother Nature's fault. You see, when Sarah and I moved to Oak Ridge Meadows, it was supposed to be our escape. We bought this 5-acre plot on the edge of the development. It was quiet, peaceful. The creek at the back of the property was small, seasonal, and well-behaved. I spent my first year carefully improving the land, reinforcing the creek's banks, keeping things in balance. But the HOA was always there, their rules about lawn height and mailbox colors a minor annoyance. They didn't bother me, and I didn't bother them. I kept my yard neat, my dues paid, and my nose out of their business. But that fine for mud? That was something different. Karen wasn't a reasonable person. She wasn't just a neighbor with a few too many rules. She was a tyrant in a golf cart. This was personal. She wanted control, and I was standing in her way. I walked out to the driveway, still holding the letter, and looked at the mess. Mud everywhere. But I wasn't just seeing a mess. I was seeing a system failure. My driveway had become a channel for runoff from the recent storm, but there was something off about it. The water wasn't behaving like it should. It was coming from my land, not just from the road. I knew what I had to do. I had to find out what had happened to my property. So I grabbed my property survey and topographical maps, and I set out on my Polaris Ranger to figure it out. I wasn't just a homeowner looking at storm damage anymore. I was an engineer analyzing a system failure. The next morning, I walked the length of my property with the same focus I used on my military assignments. The ground was wet, more saturated than usual. As I got closer to the creek, I saw it, new channels, new pathways carved into the land. Someone had been here moving earth. And when I reached the creek itself, my suspicions were confirmed. The creek was different, wider, deeper, and most importantly, straightened. Someone had altered the flow of the water, and it wasn't by accident. I knew what that meant. Straightening a creek increases the velocity of the water, making it more dangerous. And now, that water was heading straight for my property. It wasn't a natural flood, it was a manufactured one. I traced the path upstream and found the source, a berm, a crude dam made of earth and rock, blocking the creek's natural course. This was no accident. This was sabotage. The HOA, led by Karen, had hired a cheap contractor to do this work, and now it was flooding my property. They had caused the mess, and now they were trying to pin it on me. I took pictures, documented everything. I used my GPS to mark the exact locations. This wasn't just a storm cleanup issue. This was a legal alteration of a waterway, and it was directly affecting my land. I had my evidence, and now it was time to make my move. The next HOA meeting was my battleground. When Karen brought up the $1,200 fine, I didn't respond the way she expected. I wasn't going to beg or apologize. Instead, I stood up, opened my portfolio, and started showing the evidence. I showed them the original creek path, the altered channel, the berm. I laid out everything, step by step. And when Karen tried to deny responsibility, I hit her with the real kicker. The unpermitted construction, the illegal alteration of a waterway, the damage to my property, all of it had been caused by her. And she was trying to find me for it. Her face turned red. She tried to argue, but the damage was done. Her authority was shattered. The other homeowners started to see the truth. And I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for everyone she had bullied and fined. The battle didn't end there. I called in the experts. My lawyer, Dave, was an environmental law bulldog. We filed a ton of paperwork, FOIA requests, environmental protection complaints, everything we could think of. Karen thought she was above the law, but we were about to prove her wrong. The next few weeks were a blur. I organized the neighborhood, met with other residents who had been victimized by Karen's overreach. I showed them the evidence, explained the hydrology, and connected the dots between their issues and the creek project. Soon, we had a united front. Then came the moment of truth, the demand letter. We gave Karen one last chance to make it right. She ignored it, and so we went public. I called the press, brought in a county investigator, and made sure the community knew what was really going on. Karen couldn't hide anymore. The HOA's lawyer responded with a desperate email, spinning the situation. But it was too late. The truth was out. We had the evidence, and the community was with us. At the emergency HOA meeting, I stood before the board with the projector ready. I showed everyone the pictures, the emails, the proposals, the check for $4,500 paid to Karen's brother-in-law, Kevin Gable. The room was silent as I laid it all bare. Karen's face went from smug to pale, and the other homeowners started murmuring. Then, the investigator stepped forward. He introduced himself as from the County Environmental Protection Department. And just like that, Karen's kingdom came crumbling down. The press picked up the story, the county fined the HOA, and Karen's reign was over. One by one, the board members resigned, and the neighborhood started to heal. The HOA was no longer a place of petty tyranny. It became a community again. As for Karen, she showed up at my door a week later, begging me to call off the county and the press. But I wasn't interested in mercy. The time for misunderstandings was over. She had made her decisions, and now she had to live with them. Her downfall was swift. The recall election passed, and she was removed from the HOA. Her family's landscaping business was investigated, and her once pristine reputation was destroyed. She had overreached, and now it was all falling apart. Justice had been served, not with anger, but with methodical, relentless preparation. Karen's empire crumbled under the weight of her own arrogance, and the neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief. The lesson here? Power can be wielded recklessly, but sooner or later, the truth always comes to light. And when it does, justice is never far behind. So, what do you think? Is it time for us to stop letting petty tyrants get away with their abuse of power? Or is there a line we shouldn't cross when it comes to holding people accountable? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to share your own HOA horror stories. I'd love to hear them.